In this video, I am going to beat Pokemon Crystal with only a Togepi. As a kid, this was the Pokemon that whenever it hatched from the egg, I was like, oh cool, that's neat. I would try to use it in battle once, figure out very quickly that it was complete trash, and then box it for the rest of the playthrough. So here I am more than 20 years later, and I am going to force myself to beat the game with this thing. Not just once, but twice, because first playthrough results are never as accurate as I want them to be. Now, if you are a kind and caring viewer, which I know not all of you are, some of you want to see me suffer, but for those of you who don't, you might ask, why would I do this to myself? After all, Togepi only starts with Growl and Charm, and then it learns Metronome at level 7. And to that question, I would respond by saying, I'm not just going to do it with Togepi, I'm going to do it with every single baby Pokemon introduced in Generation 2. And I am also going to be releasing every single one of those videos this month. So before December the 1st, we are going to get a baby Pokemon tier list. Don't worry, these will also all be added to the regular tier list as well. That's going to become more relevant later on, but for now, let's just quickly talk about all the babies. The babies introduced in Generation 2 are Togepi, Pichu, Tyrogue, Cleffa, Igglybuff, Elekid, Magby, and Smoochum. Their base stat totals widely range, with Pichu having 205 and Magby having 365. For comparison, Pichu has the same base stat totals as Kakuna and Metapod, whereas Magby has the same base stat totals as Flaffy, Nidorina, and Nidorino. As you can see, I arranged all these guys into a base stat total tier list. This is basically objective data. I left the C tier open just because there is a fairly big stat jump between Togepi and Smoochum. Togepi is closer to Pichu than it is to Magby, but in terms of stat totals, it is basically middle of the pack. But that being said, the distribution is quite unfortunate. Togepi gets 35 HP, 20 attack, 65 defense, 40 special attack, 65 special defense, and 20 speed. It is of course a normal type, and this type is extremely strong in Generation 2 because of the move Return. However, in Generation 2, the move's damage category, so physical or special, is determined by the type, and all normal moves are physical, meaning Togepi is going to be using its attack stat for all of its same type attack bonus moves. Also, like, this thing is so slow, it is going to be moving second unless I really overlevel. And in Johto, grinding is very tedious. So what I'm really hoping for in this run is that Togepi's typing is going to carry it. I also made this more subjective tier list where I ranked the Pokemon based on their typings. Smoochum by far has the best typing for Johto. Ice-type moves do so well because there are 2 Dragon-type trainers and they come at very important points in the game. Psychic-type is also just very good in the early generations. And then I felt just behind Smoochum were all 3 of the normal type Pokemon. Beyond that, things fall pretty much how they should. I put Magby next just because fire type is better than electric type. Electric types do tend to get walled a little bit harder at Lance than fire types do. But no surprise to anyone, I put Tyrogue at the bottom of the list. Fighting types are just not one of my favorite types. I actually haven't done one yet in Generation 2, so this might be a little bit of Generation 1 bias coming in and tainting these results. We will have to wait and see, of course. And that leads me to my final baby Pokemon tier list, and this one I ranked them based on their move pools. I'm going to go through each move pool individually in each one of these Pokemon's videos, so if you want to see what their moves are and why I put them in these positions, go and check those out yourself. All I have to say is that Togepi's move pool is not very good, so let's talk about it. As I mentioned before, it starts with Growl and Charm. You are witnessing me right now struggle with that pain. It is going to take me a long time to level up to get Metronome, just because I have to spam out so much PP. I also want to mention the fact that Togepi gets 2 moves that lower the opponent's attack stat, which feels like a cruel joke. Especially because the player is meant to obtain this Pokemon from an egg, so it's gonna be level 5. I guess it's at least nice that we aren't playing a modern Pokemon game where this thing would hatch at level 1, because that would be even worse. Through level up, things really don't get much better. It gets Sweet Kiss, Encore, Safeguard, and finally Double Edge, just so it can damage itself. Now normally, you would expect this type of Pokemon to get a wide range of moves through TM and HM, however that isn't really the case for Togepi. It does get Headbutt, Rollout, Return, and Swift, which are all fantastic moves, but beyond that, like, what does it really have going for it? It gets Zap Cannon, Solar Beam, Psychic, Shadow Ball, Mud Slap, and Fire Blast. It can also learn Flamethrower through the move tutor after it defeats Lance, but like, That's quite far into the playthrough, and things are really easy once you get to Kanto. What's even worse about all of this is there are almost no special moves available to it during the Johto section of the game. Zap Cannon is obtained in the power plant in Kanto. Hidden Power is banned in all of my first playthroughs because it really over-centralizes the metagames of these solo playthroughs. Solar Beam is only available post-Clair when you have access to Waterfall. Psychic is only available once you beat Lance and reach Saffron City. Shadow Ball is a ghost-type move, so it is physical in this generation. Fire Blast is only obtained through the game corner if you buy enough coins, and 5,500 coins is actually a lot. That is 110,000 Pokédollars, so you really have to focus your playthrough around collecting money and selling items to get more money in order to obtain this TM at a reasonable time. So obviously what this means is I'm basically going to have to beat the entire first section of the game with a physical Togepi, and I'm sure that that is going to be a very painful task. Alright, so I'm about to reach level 7 and gain access to Metronome. Here I want to talk briefly about how I had to manage my moves in the early game because it is not actually that straightforward. First of all, I don't want to get Struggle before I reach Mr. Pokemon's house, so I can't do any training until then. This is because there's a mandatory heal there where all my PP would be replenished and then I would lose access to Struggle. Additionally, I also lost to Rival 1, which is why I have one reset. This is specifically because there is a mandatory heal also after his battle. Beyond that, I worked to find a Hoppip in the wild because these only know Splash. This allowed me to spam out my PP, preserving my health and not wasting any potions. And then I can use it to defeat wild Pokemon to level up to 7 where I gain access to Metronome. This does take away my ability to use Struggle, but now at least I have a move on my set that can deal damage to the opponent. Although here, I should mention that right before I take on youngster Joey, who only has a Rattata, you will notice that I saved the game. You're probably thinking, why are you saving? His Rattata is pretty bad. Well, the reason is that when you use Metronome, it can select Self-Destruct or Explosion. Now, I could take the reset and go back to the Pokemon Center, but that isn't a good idea because then all of my PP will be replenished and I will once again be far away from using Struggle. Since Metronome is so random and you can just blow yourself up, I don't think that using it as my go-to move throughout the early game is going to be very consistent. So instead, I'm just going to use it until it runs out of PP and then I'll return to Struggle. Now, one thing Togepi does have going for it is the fact that it is a fast growth rate Pokemon. Slightly counterintuitively, this is not a great advantage in the early game because medium-slow Pokemon level up faster until level 30. However, I anticipate that Red is going to be quite challenging, so knowing that I'm going to level up very fast in the late game is a relief. Just outside of Violet City, I spend some time grinding on wild Pokemon until I run out of potions, and then I head into Violet City to stop by the Pokemon Center and heal for the first time in the run. So with that, I am once again going to have to use Metronome, but I think that that's okay because Togepi has leveled up significantly. The first trainer that I have to face in the gym is Birdkeeper Abe. If you have been watching this video minimized or in the background, now is your time to watch, because this Metronome fight is wild. My first Metronome gets Icy Wind, doing massive damage to the flying type. And then I roll Metronome again, and guess what move it selects? Icy Wind for a second time, knocking the Spearow out. Alright, so that was very lucky. I actually felt good enough going up against the next Birdkeeper. He only has 2 level 7 Pidgey, and I figured that 8 uses of Metronome would be enough to defeat him. However, the game has other ideas. I got all my good luck against Birdkeeper Abe, and now here's what I get. I get Conversion 2, Curse, Guillotine, Glare, Gust, Pursuit, Seismic Toss, Spiderweb, and then I run out of PP, and due to that, I have to reset. Alright, fine, I will go back to the Pokemon Center and heal before facing Birdkeeper Abe, even though that is extremely painful to have to say. In the next fight, I actually get a very satisfying win because Togepi selects Bide with Metronome, so I accumulate a bunch of energy and pay it back, knocking out the final Pidgey. And with that, at long last, playing on 4 times game speed, I have spent 22 minutes and I have finally arrived at Falkner. So I am really ready to get into this first gym battle. As the fight gets initialized, I just want to talk about Falkner's AI briefly, and in general how AI works in this game. Whenever the AI is selecting which move it's going to choose, it rolls test ranges on all of the moves, and then it selects the one that does the highest damage. So in this case against Togepi, the Pidgey is always going to use Tackle, and the Pidgeotto is always going to use Gust. Hopefully, Metronome can come through for me. On the first turn, it doesn't really though, because it goes for Bone Rush, a ground-type move. Then I use Scary Face, Guillotine for the second time in the playthrough. Mean Look, which really does nothing. Attract. I'm going to talk about Attract later on, by the way, but for now, it's just not useful. Then I take down the Pidgey to red. My berry activates, healing, and I finally roll a good move in Aurora Beam, getting a crit and finishing the Pidgey off. I really wish I got that crit one turn later, though, on the Pidgeotto. However, on the very first turn I roll Sludge Bomb, which has a 30% chance to poison, and it does, which is very convenient. I now have available to me a more consistent strategy than rolling the dice with Metronome. I can use Charm to lower Pidgeotto's attack so that it does less to me on each turn. This buys time for Poison to work its magic, and by doing this, I actually end up beating Falkner on my first attempt. Alright, I have to say, I did not expect that. I thought I was going to be stuck there a lot longer, but with that, Togepi is moving on, and things are going to start getting easier for it. The TM for Mudslap is its first damage dealing move, so I'm going to teach it right away. Also, it's pretty useful in Union Cave against the Pokemon here. It's super effective against all the rock, poison, and fire types. By the way, I'm going to mention this now, and I'm only going to mention it once in this entire series for the baby Pokemon. I am basically going to fight every single trainer that I encounter in the overworld. There are a couple exceptions where maybe I'll skip someone because they're going to be strong against the Pokemon that I'm using, but just assume that I am fighting everyone as I proceed through areas. I'm not going to mention it in respect for your time, just because these videos would become very monotonous otherwise. Also, I think I should mention here, if you're curious about any of the other decisions I'm making in my playthrough, go and check out my playthrough rules, which are in the description. Okay, so now, at the end of Union Cave, I can pick up the TM for Swift, which is one of the most reliable moves, a direct damage move, and it gets the same type attack bonus. Plus, since I just defeated Falkner, I now have an attack boost, so Togepi's attack is better than half of what its special attack is. The next move I obtain through level up. It is Sweet Kiss, which I'm going to put in the place of Metronome because I do not want to be using this random move anymore. With this moveset at level 20, I am now ready to take on Bugsy. For this fight I brought in a Poison Cure Berry just so Kakuna can't poison me before the Scyther comes out. It takes Togepi 3 turns to knock Metapod out as well as Kakuna, and with that I'm moving on to Bugsy's Ace Scyther. I use Sweet Kiss on it to confuse it. This will hopefully increase the chance that it loses its Fury Cutter combo. After that I go for Charm to lower its attacks so that when it restarts the combo it's dealing significantly less damage. Interesting in this case, Scyther breaks its own combo by going for Quick Attack after Fury Cutter once. I am really not sure why. Either way, this gives Togepi what it needs to use Swift to knock the Scyther out over the course of 4 turns. Bugsy was pretty easy, but that is typically the case. The much harder fight in Azalea Town is definitely against the rival. He leads with Ghastly and it has 5 more speed than Togepi, so it moves first, putting me to sleep. In most cases, this status condition usually causes a reset. However, in this case, the Ghastly's only damage dealing move is Lick, and I haven't moved yet, so Spite can't do anything. That means that sleep is literally just wasting my time and being frustrating. However, once I do wake up and use Mud Slap, that gives Ghastly the chance to use Spite to lower this move's PP and potentially deplete it before I knock the Ghost out. If that happened, I'd have to knock it out with Confusion from Sweet Kiss, but luckily it doesn't, and I move on to his next Pokemon, Zubat. It goes for Bite, doing a little bit of damage, but it does cause a flinch. On the next turn, Togepi hits itself. Okay, this is getting really old. Finally, Swift hits, doing more than half. I hit on the next turn as well, finishing the Zubat. Okay, so it's time for the rival's strongest Pokemon, Bayleaf. Since it's going to set up Reflect and this fight is going to take a long time, I go for Sweet Kiss, followed by Mud Slap to lower the Bayleaf's accuracy. However, it still is able to hit 3 Razor Leafs, taking Togepi all the way down to 3 hit points. At this point, I figured the fight was over. It has green health, I have red health. I'm basically just relying on Confusion from a fairly inaccurate move, as well as chip damage from Swift. However, Reflect wears off, Bayleaf hits itself, and I get a final Swift in, finishing the fight. That win was pretty miraculous. With the rival out of the way, I now have access to the forest, so I'm going to grab Headbutt and put this move in the place of Charm. Beyond that, there isn't much to report in the next section of the game. There's a lot of errands to do in Goldenrod City and a lot of trainers to beat in the surrounding areas. All of this brings Togepi up to level 29, and with that, I am ready to face Whitney. To start things off, I go for Headbutt and I flinch the Clefairy, knocking it out in 2 hits. That is a really good start. Like against Bugsy's Scyther, I'm going to go for Sweet Kiss first on the Miltank to try and break its combos. Beyond this, I cannot continue the Bugsy strategy because I don't have Charm anymore, but Mudslap is a good replacement. I can use this move to lower Miltank's accuracy, so it's less likely to hit. Concluding this setup, I start using Headbutt, and I take the Miltank all the way down to a Sliver. And then it starts going for Milk Drink. Togepi is really not doing that much damage per hit, so each time it heals, it can deal damage before healing again. And then, to make matters even worse, I get hit by Attract. And I really need to take this moment to talk about gender in Generation 2. It is determined exclusively using the Pokemon's attack DV. DVs are of course the Generation 1 and 2 equivalent of IVs, and they are a number that ranges from 0 to 15. In order to have a male Pokemon, your attack DV must be above the Pokemon's gender ratio. So if the gender ratio is 50-50, then you need more than 50% of your attack DV filled, so you would need 8 or higher to be male, and 7 or lower to be female. That is where the bad news comes in. Using a female Togepi would have two major advantages in this playthrough. Whitney couldn't use Attract on me, and I could use Attract against Red. By the way, I say those two things because most of the AI have Pokemon that share a gender with the trainer, but in the majority of instances, that's how it works. Now, having a female Togepi is actually something that is very challenging. Togepi's gender ratio is 87.5% male and 12.5% female. So Togepi needs a 1 or a 0 in its attack DV to be female. Yeah, my attack stat is already bad enough. I am not going to do this playthrough with a female Togepi. As a result of Attract and everything else that I've mentioned, Togepi ends up losing against Whitney. In order to prepare for the next fight, I'm going to buy another Abra and then trade this Abra to this guy to get a Machop, which is holding a Goldberry. Then I train up to level 30 and teach Togepi Return. With these updates, I am ready to face Whitney again. Same strategy overall. I am just hoping that the healing from the berry as well as the damage ranges are more in my favor now. And honestly, they aren't. I have to leverage Sweet Kiss to have a chance of Miltank failing Milk Drink so that I can knock it out. And this fight goes on for a while. But eventually, things line up as I need them, and Whitney is defeated. With her badge, my normal type moves get a 12.5% damage boost, and I also get a 12.5% speed boost. Following this, I force myself to face the Sudowoodo and knock it out. This is the case in all of my first playthroughs. By the way, I'm really not doing much damage, and I'm going to use Mudslap to lower its accuracy. I think that this is the safest play, because chipping away at this thing is very dangerous since it knows Flail. Because I took things slow, I end up winning, so no resets here. By the way, Sudowoodo does sometimes cause me to have resets, mostly because I forget to heal after Whitney. After all, the Pokemon Center is in the opposite direction, and I usually don't want to waste time going back there. With it cleared, I can now quickly backtrack to the first route of the game and pick up the Pink Bow to boost the damage of normal type moves by 10%. And I think now, with this moveset and a good held item, Togepi is probably ready to start moving a bit quicker through the game. I was really hoping that it was going to have clear sailing from here. In Ecruteak City, I do my standard ordering of events. First, I fight the Kimono Girls, unless I forget them, which I basically do every time I stream. I'm working on it, don't worry. After that, I head to the Lighthouse, then I backtrack to the Burned Tower where I face the rival. Haunter curses Togepi, Mudslap fails to KO, so I do take curse damage. By the way, in Generation 2, you only take it if you fail to knock out your opponent. Magnemite's next. It does survive Mudslap, which is very rare. Luckily, it misses Supersonic. I knock it out. Zubat's next, and Return does get the one hit, so no curse damage there. Alright, he only has one Pokemon left, his ace, Bayleaf. First turn, it goes for Reflect, and even with this defensive move, I have enough damage, so I win despite the curse. By the way, this rival battle is mandatory in Pokemon Crystal. You need to complete it, otherwise you will not be given access to Morty's gym. But now with it out of the way, I can head in and fight the first Ghastly trainer, who I'm going to talk about. He has a team of 5 level 16 Ghastlies, and Togepi's Mudslap can't one-hit them. This means I am not going to get by Morty with this move. So to make up for it, I need to backtrack, grab the TM for Rollout, which I really should have grabbed earlier, and I'm going to teach this in the place of Swift. With this powerful Generation 2 staple on my set, I think I am ready to face Morty. I'm sure the regular viewers will recognize that I don't really use Rollout that much in my Generation 2 runs. The reason is, I dislike how inconsistent this move is. While it is incredibly powerful, especially when paired with Defense Curl, which by the way is only available after I get the Waterfall TM, so I need to have defeated Clair. I just really dislike the fact that while you're using it, you can't do anything else, so for instance you can't heal or use a status condition, And also, when it misses on the Pokemon that it really needs to not miss on, it is incredibly frustrating. Which is what happens here. I miss on the first Haunter, and as a result, it finishes me off, so yeah, that's it. However, in the next battle, Rollout does not miss. I'm able to take out the first Haunter with a single hit. Against Gengar, I use my 4th turn of Rollout, which easily finishes it. And then I get lucky because the 5th one hits on the final Haunter, so Morty ends up being easy once the accuracy cooperates. With his badge, I now have access to Surf, and so I can make a decision about where I'm going to go next. Either I'm going to go to the Rocket HQ and fight all the trainers there, and then fight Price, or I'm going to surf across the sea and face Chuck. For Togepi, I think the answer is pretty obvious. Going to the Lake of Rage, defeating the Red Gyarados, and then heading into the Rocket HQ is obviously the right choice. Delaying fighting Chuck is usually quite good for Pokemon that are weak to fighting types. However, I will admit that defeating Chuck is possible even with a low-level, weak, normal type of Pokemon, just because his strategies are so inconsistent. Like, he could just miss a lot of Dynamic Punch and you win anyways. But in this case, I'll be happy to have more levels first. So after defeating a bunch of trainers in Price's gym, I am now ready to earn Togepi its 5th badge. I could do in-depth narration on the Price fight, but that's really not necessary. His badge is going to give a 12.5% boost to my special attack stat, which would be amazing if Togepi actually had a special move. But right now I am stuck with 3 physical moves in Sweet Kiss. You'd think that maybe Togepi is one of the only Pokemon that has an awful scenario like this, but there are actually a lot of Pokemon introduced in Johto that have similar issues. Their primary offensive stat just doesn't line up with any of the moves that they learn. I really don't know what Game Freak was thinking from a design perspective when they chose all of these things. Like, is Togepi really only supposed to have utility once you get to Kanto? But that doesn't make a lot of sense because by that point you've probably decided that it is completely useless. And if it is supposed to be useful in the Johto portion of the playthrough, like, what niche is it supposed to fill? I really can't tell. Now that Price is defeated, it's time to head to Chuck's gym. And the trainers inside the gym might actually be scarier than Chuck himself. For example, the first black belt that you have to fight in the gym has a Hitmonlee. This thing knows double kick and jump kick. Togepi has 57 speed. I wish I had planned this, because that is 1 more speed than the black belt's Hitmonlee. As a result, I move first with Return and finish it in 1 hit. The next black belt only has a Hitmonchan. It actually has no fighting type moves, so it's not a problem. But beyond that, I have to face black belt Knob. By the way, this character is named after the translators of the games, and his Machoke is actually quite good. It knows Rock Slide and Karate Chop. Of course, the second of these is the one I'm scared of today, but luckily, Return does enough damage, so there are no problems here. The final guy in the gym just has the Mankey line, and he's really not that good, so now let's face Chuck. Togepi just barely underspeeds the Primeape, but it goes for Fury swipes, so okay, that's fine, whatever. I'm moving on to the Poliwrath basically for free. And then on the first turn, it goes for Hypnosis, missing, giving Togepi an easy victory over the fighting type gym leader. But we do need to remember that this is not the final major fighting type battle in the game. And I also need to remember that coming up next is Jasmine. And what does Togepi have against her? My current set is Return, Rollout, Sweet Kiss, and Mud Slap. And like, Mud Slap is kinda good against the Magnemites, but it's really not good against the Steelix. I figured that the accuracy drops might help out enough. After all, Iron Tail is very inaccurate. So I went into the Jasmine fight, basically living on a prayer. I'm Bon Jovi for this one, so let's see how it goes. Up first is Magnemite, I go for Mud Slap, and oh no, that's not even close to a 1-hit. Leveling up to try and defeat her is really not going to be the solution. Now the problem with not one-hitting both of the Magnemites is basically that they can stack up status conditions and do a lot of damage to you before the Steelix comes out. And this fight ends up being the perfect example of that, because I get paralyzed and then confused, and then they hit me with Thunderbolt, and Steelix does eventually come out, but I do pathetic damage and it finishes Togepi off. It's time to finally get a special move, at least I think it is, because the first one that Togepi has available to it in the entire game is Fire Blast. It costs a total of 5,500 coins, which is the equivalent of 110,000 Pokédollars. As we can see, when I am selling items in the department store, I am nowhere near that amount of money. Right now, after selling my 3 nuggets, I have 71,000 Pokédollars. It's worth noting, I really haven't bought that much stuff throughout the playthrough, and I've also fought most trainers. However, there are still some that I haven't battled, so I'm going to go and take them on now to hopefully earn myself a little bit more money. After defeating a bunch, I've also earned myself the soft sand, so I decided to go back and see if this would help one-shot the Magnemites, and no, this is not going to work against Jasmine. I get 2 more resets trying it, and then I head back to the department store to sell some more items to hopefully be able to afford Fire Blast. After spending all of my Pokédollars, I only have 4,000 coins, so if I want to get Fire Blast, I am going to have to gamble for it. This would not be a first for the channel. After all, I had to do the same tactic with coughing, specifically to get by Jasmine. Because I'm quite far away from getting the money that I need, and because gambling is going to take a while, I decided to just level up 2 more times to 53 and attempt Jasmine again. Still, the Magnemites are not a one-hit. And in this fight, things spiral out of control and I don't even make it to the Steelix. I tried 2 more times with a Paralyzed Cure Berry, but both times this does not work out, even when I do get to use Mud Slap and Sweet Kiss against the Steelix. Now instead of gambling for Fire Blast, I just decided to train. After all, Togepi is probably going to need a very high level to complete the game, so putting in some time now will eventually pay off near the end of the game. Whereas investing time gambling for Fire Blast isn't necessarily going to pay off anywhere but here. After reaching level 55, I get a very lucky streak against the Steelix where I'm able to lower its accuracy. Togepi gets brought to red health, and this is before Jasmine uses her Hyper Potion. After she uses it, I run out of Mud Slap PP, and the best thing that I can do is use Return. Feels really bad using a normal type move against this thing, even when I'm a normal type Pokemon, but it actually is doing decent damage, and the Steelix doesn't hit me, allowing Togepi to finally defeat Jasmine. By the way, someone is going to ask in the comments where the Amulet Coin is. The Amulet Coin is at the very end of the Rocket plotline in Radio Tower, so you can't obtain that item before you fight Jasmine. By the way, I will show proof where the Amulet Coin is right after I defeat the rival. Once again, a Magnemite is the bane of Togepi's existence because this one survives Mud Slap. Yep, it uses Thunder Wave, paralyzing Togepi, and as a result, I get a curse put on me by the Haunter. I don't get to attack, I barely just miss knocking it out, survive on 1 hit point, which is kinda cool, but the Sneasel just finishes me off. Okay, so has anyone else caught the solution for these Magnemites? Because with the Pink Bow, Return actually does more damage than Mud Slap. That is hilarious. In this case, I also get a critical hit, so Magnemite goes down in a single turn, and I don't get paralyzed. As a result, I have defeated the rival. Now, after I talk to the radio director, I just go out here, go up these stairs, and right there, that's the Amulet Coin. The rest of the Rocket plotline is trivial. After that, I head into the department store, and I actually decided to spend some money on vitamins. It doesn't look like I'm going to need Fire Blast for this playthrough. As I head through Ice Path, I just want to remark on the fact that Togepi doesn't learn any Ice-type moves. It really feels like as a normal type, it should have got them. If it was introduced in Generation 1, this thing definitely would have been getting Ice Beam and Blizzard. The truly ironic thing is that if in Generation 2 it had got Icy Wind, Return still probably would have just been better against Clair's Dragonairs. So let's see how she goes. Hopefully there's going to be no problems here. I am massively over-leveled after all. This fight is really only difficult if you can't one-hit the Dragonairs and then they get Thunder Wave off. But it looks like after the first 2, Togepi has guaranteed one-hit ranges. I finish her first 3 Pokemon off, move on to Kingdra, and if you're one-hitting the Dragonairs, you are going to 2-hit the Kingdra. I take it to red health, survive a critical hit from Surf, Clair uses a Hyper Potion, and I use 2 more returns to finish her off. With that, Togepi has completed the Johto Gym Challenge, and now I am off towards Indigo Plateau. Before I face the Elite Four, of course, I have to take on the rival in Victory Road. My experience in Crystal has taught me that there is one very common loss condition in this battle. It is usually the fact that the Magneton paralyzes you with Thunder Wave. There are 2 less likely loss conditions, which is Confusion from the Golbat or Curse from the Haunter, but other than that, this fight is usually quite easy. But today, Togepi does get paralyzed, and I get a reset here. That loss makes me think maybe I should have invested the time to get Fire Blast. If I was using Fire Blast instead of Mud Slap on the Magneton, I would definitely be one-shotting it. Still, there's another way to make this fight more consistent right now, which is just to bring a Paralyzed Cure Berry into the battle, so even with Mud Slap, Togepi still pulls through. With the rival defeated, now it's time to take on the Elite Four. For maximum damage against Will, I picked up the spell tag when I was in Blackthorn City. By the way, it's just south of the gym over some little ledges. This is going to boost the damage of Shadow Ball by 10%. I also have Morty's damage buff for all ghost type moves, so that's another 12.5% damage, which compounds. Also, due to the grinding that I've done in this playthrough, Togepi is very overleveled, and as a result, it sweeps itself to a very easy victory over Will. If you thought that Koga was going to be more difficult, you would be wrong, because I have Rollout for him. His team consists of a lot of bugs, and then there's the flying type Crobat. There are only 2 Pokemon that aren't weak to Rollout. The Fortress is one, which is kind of annoying because it does survive, I miss, and then I have to knock it out with Return. At this point it didn't make sense to start Rollout again, so just use Return to finish off the Muck in 2 turns and move on to Koga's ace, Crobat. It goes for Wing Attack, getting a critical hit, which really doesn't do that much. My Return takes it to red health. Koga uses a full restore. I use Return again, taking it back down to red health. It tries one more Wing Attack, but it's futile, and I win. So Togepi is 2 for 2 right now against the league, but up next is Bruno, and he technically has a type advantage against me. The Hitmontop survives a hit, it usually does, but it only goes for Dig, which always does so little damage. It is funny seeing the Hitmontop use Dig, when in Generation 1 that move would do so much more damage, and here it's like so pathetic. Anyways, I finish it off, move on to the Hitmonlee, which I one-shot with Return. Hitmonchan is next, it has priority Mach Punch, doing a tiny bit of damage. I take it out, and then Bruno sends in the Machamp. Now, this thing is going to survive a single Return. It does on orange health, and as a result, it gets to use Cross Chop. But this move, as a fighting type move, is not very accurate, so it misses, and Togepi knocks it out after Bruno uses a max potion. All that's left is Onix. I do go for Return here. It is slightly more powerful than Shadow Ball. That's because I have the pink bow. If I didn't have the pink bow, Shadow Ball definitely would be better here. Either way, it doesn't matter. Onix is really weak, so I take it out, and that is 3 for 3. Togepi is moving on to Karen with no resets during the league. So will she be able to stop its absolute terror? And the answer looks like it's going to be no, because the Umbreon just goes for Feint Attack on the first turn. As a result, I finish it off without having my accuracy lowered or becoming confused. Things continue to go Togepi's way because it crits the Vileplume, avoiding Stun Spore paralysis, and makes it to the Gengar relatively unscathed. Gengar goes for Curse, I hit Shadow Ball, knocking it out, so I take no Curse damage, and move on to the Murkrow. Return 1 hits after I take chip damage from Feint Attack, so now how much damage is Houndoom going to do? It goes for Flamethrower, and it really doesn't do that much. Togepi takes it out, and with that win, Togepi has gone 4 for 4 against the Elite Four, and now for Lance, I am going to teach Togepi Rest. The reason I'm teaching this to Togepi now is just so it can heal whenever it gets paralyzed by one of the Dragonites. This is going to be helpful because overall here I'm going to be relying on Rollout, which is by definition quite inconsistent. However, its power stacks up quickly, especially when I have 2 turns against the Gyarados. In this instance, the inconsistency I speak of is just the fact that it can miss. Its power, on the other hand, is not inconsistent. This thing stacks up very quickly against the first Gyarados, reaching an effective power of 528 against the first Dragonite, which obviously just one-shots. Dragonite number 2 is next. This is the last one that knows Thunder Wave. Rollout continues its spree, knocking it out, and with that I have arrived at the Aerodactyl, and the annoying status condition is behind me. Aerodactyl goes for Hyper Beam right away, which really doesn't do that much. Togepi is just really overleveled right now, that's why it's having no problems. Because Lance used Hyper Beam though, it gives me the time I need to set up with Rollout, finish the Aerodactyl off, hit for 4 times damage against the Charizard, knocking it out in a single hit, and now I have arrived at Lance's final Pokemon, his Ace Dragonite. I'm slower than it by 2 speed, by the way. It hits Outrage, taking Togepi to red health. Luckily for me, Rollout connects and Dragonite goes down. As I head to Kanto, the level discrepancy between Togepi and the enemy Pokemon just becomes even greater. As a result, Togepi does not have a single reset against all of the first 7 gym leaders here. And that brings me to the Viridian City Gym where I face Blue. Because Rollout is super effective against his lead Pidgeot, I figured that it would be a great starting move to go for, and then I could sweep through like 2 or 3 other Pokemon on his team. However, in this case, it takes 3 turns to knock out the Pidgeot, which is very disappointing, and then it misses on the Alakazam. So this is what I'm talking about being not consistent. By the way, if you're playing a solo challenge and you only care about game time, please just beat the entire game with Rollout, because this move is fantastic for doing things like that. However, when real time is the primary concern and a low reset count is a badge of honor, this move really is not very nice. In this case, this battle ends in defeat largely because the Rhydon and Sandstorm. By the way, this weather effect in Generation 2 is absolutely fantastic. It does 1/8 of your health and damage every turn. By the way, this was changed in Generation 3, and then in Generation 4 they added the special defense bonus for rock-type Pokemon, so it kind of got worse and then got better, but overall I would say that Sandstorm is at its best here in Generation 2. You know what else is at its best in Generation 2? Moves that really centralize the metagame, because Curse is obviously going to be the solution that I need here. I can easily set it up on the Pidgeot, and then when I'm at +4, I figured this would be enough to just sweep his entire team. However, against the Rhydon, Shadow Ball does way less than I was hoping it would. By the way, this is the best move against it. Because I'm not able to knock it out, it sets up with Sandstorm, and you can see it's doing a lot of damage to me, even though I have the leftovers, so I'm just not able to heal as much as it deals every turn. Blue does some fancy switching, I knock the Gyarados out, then he sends Rhydon back in, and I just finish it. Shadow Ball one-hits the Executor, and Arcanine does get a Flamethrower in, which Togepi survives quite confidently, and with that, the final gym in Kanto is finished. I'm ready to face Red. I want to draw everyone's attention to the fact that I have Detect instead of Protect. That should earn me some style points. Other than that though, my moveset is incredibly generic. With Togepi, I felt the safest way to play it was just to knock the Pikachu out right away, knock the Espeon out in 2 hits, and then set up against the Snorlax as it tries to spam normal type moves. I can also buy time here for leftovers to heal my health using Detect, and eventually I'm able to heal, and I have +2 defense against the Snorlax, so I should be safe. That is unless it gets a critical hit. In that case, it takes me all the way down to orange health, but Togepi does confidently survive, so I should be able to get another rest in. In this fight, you'll notice that my Togepi is level 88. I saved all 10 rare candies throughout this playthrough since this was the first baby that I played. I wanted to be overly safe and not use those too early on. This is largely why I can survive critical hits from Snorlax so easily with Togepi. However, I can't survive 2 in quick succession before I get another rest in, so that's how my first battle ends. I get less lucky in the next fight because Pikachu paralyzes me right away with Thunder. Then Espeon sets up Reflect and I can't do very much damage to it, and it takes me out with a critical hit from Psychic. Okay, Red, you really gotta stop getting critical hits. This is annoying. In the next fight, the Espeon just goes for Psychic right away, and this time Togepi is the one that crits. Okay, that is more like it. As a result, I arrive at the Snorlax with green health, and I can set up Curse 4 times before using my first rest. I'm able to set up to +6, dodging all critical hits, and then I use Return, finishing Snorlax in a single hit. Venusaur's next, it sets up the Sun, I finish it off with a single Return, and then he sends in Charizard. Yeah, its Flamethrower is gonna hit so hard, but Togepi pulls through, hits Return, gets a crit, and finishes Charizard off. All that's left is Blastoise. I was honestly pretty worried here that it was going to one-hit me with Blizzard. After all, it's going to choose this move just because the sun is on the field. However, that has an advantage for Togepi because the Blastoise has a 30% chance to miss. In this case, it does, so Togepi clocks in with a time of 2 hours, 41 minutes, and 22 seconds, with 15 resets at level 88. This is a game time of 9 hours and 49 minutes. We're going to start watching footage from my second playthrough now, and I need to make a disclaimer here. I came back and did a third playthrough with Togepi, but the results from it were not as good as this second playthrough. So for the tier list, we are going to take the second result because my tier list is always ranking a Pokemon based on their best results. The fact that the third playthrough gave a worse time, despite having some more optimal held items throughout the run, really shows just how fragile these babies can be. That's kind of thematic today, actually. Togepi's an egg, so like if you drop an egg, good things do not happen. Yeah, this thing is a little bit brutal, And a lot of that comes from the early game when you have to rely on metronome. Unless very lucky, Togepi is going to have some resets here. However, it can also have a really good time. So first of all, we're going to watch this fight against the rival's Chikorita, and I'm just not getting the metronome moves that I need to defeat it quickly. This slows things down a little bit. Whereas in my third playthrough, I just metronome Fire Blast right away and one-shot the Chikorita. So yeah, sometimes it's great, sometimes it's bad. By the time I'm fighting Falkner, I already have 3 resets, and I am going to have 1 more here. It comes in the most hilarious way. I have prepared in case I metronome a rock-type move with the Hard Stone. And I do, in the form of Ancient Power, but it happens too late in the fight, so I lose anyway. The question you should have here is, would Struggle be a better option than using Metronome in this fight? And the answer is no. In Generation 2, Struggle is not a normal type move, so it doesn't benefit from the same type attack bonus, and Falkner's damage plus recoil is going to knock Togepi out. I have to luck through this portion of the game, and then with Mud Slap, things get a little bit more consistent. I also grab Swift, and in combination with the Pink Bow this early on, I have a more reliable source of damage throughout the next section of the game. That being said, the next section of the game is not reliable at all. I'm using a Togepi. Of course, I should note that I don't have the Pink Bow right now, and that is specifically because this is an item I rooted in for my third playthrough to make the section of the game in Azalea Town more consistent, because it was not consistent this time around. Bugsy isn't really the problem. I can just use Sweet Kiss to mess up the Scyther, and then with some luck I'll make it through. I get through on my second attempt in this case. The major issue is instead the rival. Togepi just doesn't have a reliable answer for the Bayleaf. It does have an answer though. It can use Mud Slap, ruin the accuracy, and then win this way. Here I get a lucky result because I make it by the Bayleaf with only 7 resets. Also, note the fact that I'm using the Paralyze Cure Berry. This is irrelevant. The Ghastly cannot paralyze me because it has Lick. The item I really should have during this fight is the Poison Cure Berry. And I did use it in my third playthrough. You would think that would help the results, but they were actually worse. So now I'm going to completely stop talking about my third playthrough and just focus on the second one. After lucking through the rival, I have to win another lucky fight against Whitney, although I will state that this one requires significantly less luck than facing the rival. In this case, Headbutt is going to 4-hit the Miltank, but it is definitely going to knock out Togepi with its rollouts and stomps before then. So using your own rollout is the best option. The drawback to this strategy, of course, is that if rollout misses at the worst possible moment, then you will get a reset. That's what happens here against Whitney, not once, but twice. It was very frustrating, but the third try was what I needed, so Miltank goes down. Following Whitney, I can now use Hidden Power, and this is going to be Hidden Power Ice. It gives Togepi a special attacking move, and if you didn't already know, Hidden Power Ice is the best Hidden Power typing in Generation 2, at least for a solo playthrough. It gives Togepi an answer for the rival's Bayleaf, for example, in Burned Tower, and it also gives me better direct damage against Morty instead of having to use Rollout. In this case, I am still going to use the move, but I'm only going to start setting up on the Haunter after knocking the Ghastly out with Hidden Power. From there, things are easier because I'm not as far into Rollout when the Gengar comes out, so I defeat Morty on my first attempt. Next, I went to Chuck. Now, this isn't really a problem. By the way, I am forgetting a Mint Berry. I hope you can see why I went back and did a third run. In general, I don't like showing footage that isn't my final plan, but in this case, I think it's okay. Chuck is not really an issue. If you want to be even safer here, just go and face Price first. That is what I ended up doing with my final route. Good planning throughout this playthrough allows me to buy the Fire Blast TM, and with it I can absolutely shred both Price as well as Jasmine. Hidden Power Ice is nice against Clair, but you can just use Return anyways. This fight is not difficult. Skipping ahead to the rival before the league, I want to be level 63 by the end of this fight. Then I can use a total of 7 rare candies to bring Togepi up to level 70 before I take on the league. This makes Will and Koga very easy, but what I'm really optimizing for here is the fight against Bruno. I'm going to go through 2 sets of damage ranges here. The first one is what I would have had if I did not use the rare candies. Then I'm going to go over all the improved damage ranges at the higher level. So at level 64, I have a 2-hit on the Hitmontop, a 1-hit on the Hitmonlee, and I underspeed it. I have a 35% chance to 1-hit the Hitmonchan, a 2-hit on the Machamp, and a guarantee with Hidden Power on the Onix. Notably, the worst possible Mach Punch in combination with Cross Chop will not knock me out though. That being said, it doesn't even matter because both the Hitmontop and Hitmonlee would deal damage to Togepi. I hope you can see that not using the rare candies isn't really an option, and the rare candies here are acceptable because I don't need them later on to defeat Red. At level 71, I have a 66% chance to 1-hit the Hitmontop, a 100% chance on the Hitmonlee and the Hitmonchan, then a 2-hit on the Machamp and a guarantee on the Onix. This reduces the damage by eliminating it entirely on the Hitmontop as well as the Hitmonlee because now Togepi outspeeds. There are some loss conditions though. You're going to see one of them right here. I go for return on the Machamp, it survives, hits cross chop and gets a critical hit. There is no way to play around that. Despite that looking and feeling really bad, it isn't actually that bad because the Machamp isn't going to always choose cross chop. In the very next fight, it chooses Foresight, doing absolutely nothing, and I just knock it out for free. Karen is also slightly inconsistent. This just comes down to the Umbreon lowering your accuracy. If I miss against the Houndoom, then I lose, but if I hit it with return, then I win. Now, before I did my full second playthrough, I actually had a failed attempt at a second playthrough because I did not prepare for Lance well enough. Having the correct speed value for this fight is vital. You have to outspeed the first and second Dragonites. It's nice if you can outspeed the Ace Dragonite, but it isn't required. The reason it isn't required is because you're going to knock out the Gyarados as well as the first 2 Dragonites for free. Then both the Aerodactyl and the Charizard are going to damage Togepi. This leaves my Togepi on orange health, and unless the Dragonite gets a critical hit with Outrage, I will survive. It doesn't get lucky in this case, so I've won. The final trainer in the game is Red, and I had to adjust my strategy just slightly here for him. With Togepi only at level 83, I am going faster through the game. However, I do have to set up against the Pikachu. I'm just going to take too much damage from it as well as the following Espeon to be able to have a reliable time against the Snorlax if I take the previous approach. Plus, Togepi isn't dealing as much damage with return at the lower level, so it only has a 59% chance to knock the Pikachu out in a single hit without setup. This isn't a problem, the Pikachu isn't a threat. I can use Protect to really stall out its Thunder, and then Rest to heal up and continue my setup. The only loss condition here is if you get paralyzed and then can't move and heal yourself, which does happen once. But in the next fight I'm able to get fully set up, knock the Pikachu out, as well as the Espeon, and move on to the Snorlax. This is my best opportunity to heal for the rest of the fight, so I'm gonna take it. By the way, if the Snorlax gets a critical hit, it will not knock Togepi out if it's at full health. Body Slam's crits only do between 75 and 88% damage. That does mean if I'm at lower health, it will knock me out, but if I use Rest right away against it, the risk is minimal. I finish it off, Venusaur's next, it's gonna set up the Sun, so I'm gonna take a lot of damage from the Charizard. However, by using Protect, I can gain back a little bit of health and just barely survive Blastoise's Blizzard. In this case, Togepi lives with 24 health, and I knock it out. By the way, this damage range is specifically the reason that I needed level 83. I would have tried it at a lower level if I could have survived that hit from Blastoise, but it's just not possible. In my second playthrough with Togepi, I was able to get a time of 2 hours, 7 minutes, and 11 seconds, with 12 resets at level 84. This is a game time of 7 hours and 53 minutes. I'm sure you're curious, so in my third playthrough I was able to get a time of 2 hours, 12 minutes, and 16 seconds, with 12 resets at level 84. This was with a game time of 8 hours and 9 minutes. It would have been really nice to get Togepi's final result under 2 hours, but I just wasn't able to pull it off today. I do think it's possible if you get good early game metronome luck, then good luck against the rival in Azalea Town, as well as against Bruno, Karen, and then later on Red. While searching for that luck might be in my distant future, it isn't right now. After all, I invested a total time of 7 hours and 49 seconds doing Togepi playthroughs that I completed. It's also key to note that this time does not include my failed attempt where I got stuck at Lance. In the end, the best result that I got with Togepi is 34 minutes and 11 seconds faster than my first attempt. By the way, many of you point out when I am off by 1 second with my math in these time calculations. Turns out I'm not actually off with my math. There is just rounding happening because of milliseconds. Yes, I record milliseconds in all of my splits. In my second playthrough I had only 12 resets, so 3 less than the first one. Not a great result, but I'll take it. I also finished the game 4 levels lower, which is really nice. That reduces Togepi's overall game time by 1 hour and 56 minutes. Alright, so let's bring up our baby Pokemon tier list. For this one, Togepi today is going to get the top spot because we have no context. As we get more results, I assume that Togepi will be shuffled lower. At least I hope it will be. It would be a disaster if all of these playthroughs were over 2 hours long. Now let's bring up my regular Generation 2 tier list. Togepi's time of 2 hours, 7 minutes, and 11 seconds is slower than Smeargle, but faster than Slugma, Coughing, Wooper, Misdreavus, Pineco, and Ditto. Of course, it didn't legitimately beat the game with Ditto, it needed save states. So with a time under 2 hours and 15 minutes, today Togepi earns itself a spot right in the middle of the F tier. I have now completed 1 out of 8 baby Pokemon, and tomorrow I'm going to be playing the game with Tyrogue. This is its move pool, by the way. Yeah, please tune in tomorrow. It's gonna be a lot of fun. If you support me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships, thank you so much. It really does mean the world to me. If you have made it this far in the video, you're incredible. I'll see you in the next one.